Have you ever wondered how many parts of your life were truly chosen by you, and how many were just emotional reactions dressed up as decisions? You didn't wake up one day and decide to be overly available. It happened slowly. You smiled when you didn't want to. You replied to texts you should have ignored. You explained yourself to people who never cared to understand you. Piece by piece, you traded your inner silence for external approval. You believed that being reachable meant being kind, that being understanding meant being loved. But over time, you realized the more you gave, the more they took, and the less of you remained. This video is not about becoming cold or distant. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were never meant to be public property. It's about the quiet evolution from being emotionally hijacked to becoming emotionally sovereign. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you finally started choosing what deserves to be felt. And that changes everything. You weren't born this way. You weren't born feeling the need to explain yourself, to smile when you didn't mean it, to say yes when your soul screamed no. That was taught, conditioned, etched into your nervous system by years of subtle reinforcement. It started small, maybe with a parent who praised you only when you behaved, or a teacher who punished silence as defiance. Over time, the message sank in: to be loved is to be pleasing is to be compliant, and to be compliant means to suppress your truth. So you learned to read the room before you read yourself. You molded your words to avoid tension. You became a master at anticipating other people's needs while slowly losing awareness of your own. You responded to messages out of guilt. You kept conversations alive that drained you. You stayed in spaces long after they stopped feeling safe, just because leaving would have made someone else uncomfortable. And you called it kindness. But deep down you knew. The pit in your stomach before a fake "I'm fine." The quiet resentment that brewed after saying yes again. The exhaustion of carrying everyone else's expectations while abandoning your own. That wasn't love. That wasn't generosity. That was self-erasure disguised as compassion. You see, the world doesn't teach you to be sovereign. It teaches you to be accessible, agreeable, manageable. And it praises you for it until you break, until you burn out, until you realize you become a character in other people's stories, reacting instead of writing your own. This is where the awakening begins. When you stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and start asking, "What do I actually want to give?" When you stop seeing your silence as weakness and start recognizing it as power. When you realize that being emotionally reachable to everyone is the fastest way to lose yourself entirely. You were trained to be someone else. Now it's time to unlearn it all and finally become who you actually are. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in reactions. In that split second when someone criticizes you and you rush to defend yourself. In that moment when they pull away emotionally and you start over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-giving, trying to repair what you didn't even break. You become a performer on autopilot, acting not from truth, but from fear. Reaction is not just a habit, it's a trap, a deeply ingrained reflex that makes you predictable, controllable, and ultimately exhausted. The world is filled with people who know exactly how to push your buttons. But here's the secret: no one told you. Those buttons only work because you left them exposed. Every time you react, you hand over a piece of your power. When you explode in anger, you reveal your weaknesses. When you over-explain, you seek validation from people who don't value you. When you constantly respond, even when your energy is low, you confirm to others that your boundaries are negotiable. That's how people learn to manipulate you, not through strength, but through your own unconscious compliance. And the scariest part, you start thinking that being reactive means you're engaged, that it proves you care. But in truth, it just proves you're not in control. Real strength begins in stillness. Power lives in the pause. The space between stimulus and response is where your freedom resides. It's not about bottling up emotion or becoming numb. It's about becoming selective, intentional. choosing your response rather than being driven by your wounds. Ask yourself, who are you when you're not reacting? What would change if you let silence be your first language? You don't need to respond to every insult, every tone, every shift in someone else's mood. You are not an emotional puppet. And the moment you stop reacting, you stop bleeding energy and start reclaiming your identity. Most people misunderstand what it means to be unreachable. They think it's cold, detached, arrogant, but they don't realize it's none of those things. Becoming unreachable is not about disappearing from the world. It's about showing up with full presence, but from a place of sovereignty, not survival. You don't become unreachable because you stop feeling. You become unreachable because you finally stop giving everyone permission to access your emotions. You learn that being constantly available, constantly open, constantly responsive doesn't make you generous, it makes you vulnerable to chaos. Unreachable doesn't mean unkind. It means untouchable by manipulation. It means people can't guilt you into things. They can't provoke you just to see you squirm. They can't read your emotional state and use it against you. Why? Because you no longer hand your emotional keys to everyone who knocks. To be unreachable is to reclaim control over what enters your inner world. It is the shift from "I must explain myself" to "I choose who deserves my truth." It is a psychological fortress built not from ego, but from clarity, from lived experience, from the deep, quiet pain of being too accessible for too long. There is power in not answering every message. There is dignity in not explaining your silence. There is magnetism in the unknown, because what people can't control, they begin to respect. You become unreachable not because you're better than others, but because you finally understand your worth. You no longer hand over emotional access just because someone demands it. You grant access by invitation, not obligation. And this shift, this quiet rebellion, is the turning point. The day you stop being emotionally reachable to everyone is the day you begin to reach yourself. Unreachable isn't isolation. It's precision. It's presence with protection. It's knowing that your inner world is sacred and not everyone gets a map. Silence isn't emptiness. It's control. We live in a world addicted to noise, where the loudest voice wins the room and everyone scrambles to be understood, liked, or heard. But there's a rare kind of person who walks into that same room and says nothing, and yet somehow owns the space. Their power isn't in their volume. It's in their restraint, their mystery, their stillness. Because silence makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to wonder what you're thinking, where you stand, how much you actually know. And that uncertainty, that's power. The less you reveal, the more they project. The less you say, the more they lean in. Mystery doesn't repel people, it draws them in. Not through performance, but through presence. You see, when you're always explaining yourself, defending your feelings, narrating your every move, you make yourself small. You make yourself predictable, and predictability kills intrigue. But when you embrace the silence, when you stop offering a running commentary of your thoughts and emotions, something strange happens. People start to listen more carefully. They start to wonder. And in wondering, they begin to respect. Mystery is not about playing games. It's about protecting depth. Because not everything you think, feel, or experience needs to be public property. Your interior world is not a reality show. It's a sacred space, and the more you honor it, the more others will too. People fear silence because they mistake it for weakness. But silence, when chosen, is strategy. It says, I don't owe you anything. I speak when I decide, not when I'm provoked. That kind of energy disarms manipulators, repels attention seekers, and commands the respect of the few who are truly worth your time. You don't need to tell everyone who you are. Let your boundaries speak. Let your silence weigh. Because the most powerful presence in any room is the one that doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. Human beings are addicted to what they can't control. It's not chaos they crave. It's mystery, the unknown, the untouchable. Because the moment something becomes fully understood, it becomes familiar. And what's familiar becomes ordinary. But when a person holds something back, when they don't reveal everything, when they move with intention and silence, it activates a different response. Intrigue, tension, obsession. The truth is, people don't chase what they've already figured out. They chase what they can't quite grasp, what eludes them, what resists their attempts to define or contain it. That's why the most emotionally magnetic individuals are rarely the loudest or the most available. They're the ones who leave space, the ones who don't explain every action or emotion, the ones who withhold just enough to make you wonder if there's more. And that wondering keeps people coming back. But this isn't manipulation, it's clarity. It's the conscious decision to not let yourself be consumed by the need to be known. When you make peace with being misunderstood, you become dangerous in the best way. Because now you no longer react to curiosity with over-disclosure. You allow people to sit in their uncertainty, to earn your truth, not assume it. And here's the paradox. The more you hold back, the more people want access. The less you explain, the more people try to understand. Humans are wired for pursuit, not possession. Once they feel like they own your emotions, your thoughts, your presence, they stop valuing them. So the next time you feel the urge to over-explain, to clarify, to hand over your entire story, pause. Let the silence do the work. Let the unknown be part of your presence. Because mystery is not a mask, it's a boundary. A quiet, powerful statement that says, I am not yours to decode. I am mine to protect. Letting go has always been misunderstood. They say it's weakness. They say it's giving up. They say it's quitting. But what if letting go is the most powerful thing you can do? What if it's not a collapse, but a conscious release? What if it's not an end, but a beginning? We hold on to things that suffocate us, relationships that drain our spirit, jobs that strip our creativity, roles that we've outgrown but still perform because we're afraid of the silence that follows. We hold on because we confuse attachment with loyalty, because we think walking away means we failed. But here's the truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave what no longer fits. Letting go isn't about detachment from love. It's about detachment from illusion. The illusion that if you hold on long enough, things will change. That if you shrink yourself just a little more, you'll finally be accepted. That if you explain one more time, they'll finally understand you. But you've tried. You've bled for it. You've exhausted your emotional reserves. And still you remain unseen, unheard, unheld. Letting go is saying no more. It's not spite. It's self-respect. It's the decision to stop proving your worth in spaces where it's never been truly valued. It's the moment you stop begging for clarity and start building your own peace. You stop running toward closure and start closing the chapter yourself. And in that moment, something shifts. The anxiety lifts. The noise softens. You begin to breathe again, not because the world changed, but because you did. You chose yourself. That's not failure, that's liberation. And the most beautiful part, you don't need permission. You don't need a perfect explanation. You just need a truth that's too loud to keep ignoring. Because real power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, let go. And when you finally listen, you realize you were never meant to carry it all anyway. You don't owe them an explanation. Not for your distance, not for your boundaries, not for the silence you've chosen as your peace. There comes a moment in every self-aware person's life when they realize explaining yourself is often just another form of seeking permission. But here's the truth. People who love you don't need constant clarification. And those who constantly demand explanations rarely seek to understand you. They seek control. They want access. They want to shape your decisions, twist your motives, and push your emotional buttons under the disguise of needing closure. You've spent years justifying why you walked away, why you changed, why you no longer tolerate what once broke you. You've overexplained your boundaries to people who never planned to respect them in the first place. And for what their comfort. Let this sink in. You are not obligated to make others feel comfortable at the expense of your own clarity. You don't have to prove that you're a good person. You don't have to explain why protecting your energy matters. You don't have to list reasons for choosing your peace. Silence is not avoidance, it's alignment. And when used intentionally, silence becomes the most powerful answer you can give. Because here's what most won't tell you. People don't need data, they look for confirmation. They've already written a story about who you are, and your words will only be used to validate their narrative. So why hand them more ink? Choosing not to explain is choosing to protect your inner world. It's the decision to stop feeding other people's assumptions. It's the realization that your life is not a courtroom, you're not on trial, and you don't owe anyone a defense. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the unanswered questions. Because your silence isn't emptiness, it's sovereignty. And you don't owe anyone access to the parts of you that you fought so hard to reclaim. Real boundaries are not announcements. They're not bold declarations plastered across social media. They're not warnings wrapped in ultimatums. True boundaries are quiet-lived, embodied. They don't need to be shouted to be understood because the people meant for you will feel them without a single word. You see, boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about protecting yourself. And the most powerful ones are felt, not forced. They exist in the way you no longer over-explain, in the way you pause before answering, in the way you walk away without needing to burn the bridge or leave a dramatic speech behind. People notice energy shifts more than we think. When you stop being emotionally accessible, when you stop responding to every demand, when you no longer allow yourself to be pulled into the chaos of others, it sends a message. I respect myself too much to be available for what drains me. And that message, it's louder than any spoken boundary could ever be. You don't need to beg people to respect your limits. If they don't feel it through your presence, they were never planning to honor it through your words. Some people only listen to silence. Some only understand when they no longer have access. The moment you start living your boundaries instead of just talking about them is the moment you reclaim your power. It's no longer about what you say, it's about what you no longer tolerate, what you don't respond to, what you gracefully exit from without apology. And yes, it may confuse or even upset those who once benefited from your lack of limits. But that's not your responsibility to manage. Your responsibility is to your peace, to your emotional clarity, to the sacred space within you that should never be compromised for convenience. Because when you live your boundaries instead of explaining them, you stop asking for respect and start commanding it. They'll tell you you're too calm, too quiet, too slow to respond. But what they're really saying is this: I can't read you, and that makes me uncomfortable. In a world that rushes, that demands instant feedback, that rewards emotional overexposure, stillness is often mistaken for weakness. But the truth is, it's anything but. Stillness is restraint. It's wisdom. It's the art of not giving your energy to things that don't deserve a reaction. Because impulsive people move fast and break themselves in the process. They chase closure. They fire off responses they regret. They react to every tone, every shift in expression, every perceived slight. But the ones who hold power, they wait. They observe. They respond when and only when it serves their peace. This is not passivity, it's strategy. You're not cold, you're calculating. Not in a manipulative sense, but in a deeply intentional one. You've learned the hard way that rushing to prove yourself only empties you. That speaking too soon often strengthens the other side's narrative. That some battles are best won in silence or by walking away altogether. Patience is not inaction. It's mastery over impulse. It's choosing not to be dragged into someone else's chaos. It's letting others reveal themselves while you remain rooted, unmoved, untouchable. You no longer jump at every notification. You don't answer every message. You don't clarify every misunderstanding. Not because you don't care, but because you care more about your energy than about being perceived correctly. And here's the paradox. Those who seem emotionally unavailable are often the most emotionally disciplined. They've built a fortress around their peace, not because they're hiding, but because they've bled too much for too long. And now they've chosen stillness over spectacle, strategy over reaction. So the next time someone calls your silence avoidance, smile gently. Let them misread you, because in that moment you've already won. Not through noise, but through presence, precision, and patience. Emotional self-mastery is not a finish line. It's not a medal you earn one day and hang on the wall forever. It's a practice, a discipline, a daily choice to rise above the noise, to respond with clarity instead of reacting from chaos, to choose inner stability even when the world tries to shake you. You will stumble. You will fall back into old habits. You will catch yourself explaining when you swore you wouldn't. You'll feel the urge to react, to please, to fight for validation. And when it happens, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human and healing. This path isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about noticing your emotional triggers without letting them drive the wheel. It's about recognizing when you're slipping into the old pattern and gently pulling yourself back without shame. Mastery is not coldness. It's compassion first for yourself. It's giving yourself grace in moments of weakness while still holding yourself accountable to something higher, your peace. Because every day you will be tested by people who push your boundaries, by situations that mirror your wounds, by emotions that beg for attention. But over time, something changes. The space between the trigger and the response gets wider. The need to be understood gets quieter. The urge to prove yourself fades. And what remains is clarity, strength, presence, not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that's undeniable. You no longer perform for approval. You live in alignment. You no longer react to everything that moves. You respond only to what matters. You begin to understand that being unreachable isn't about isolation, it's about sovereignty. So if today was messy, if you reacted when you meant to pause, that's okay. Breathe, reset, try again. Because the journey of emotional mastery isn't about never falling. It's about always choosing to rise with more intention, more clarity, and more love for the version of you that's still becoming. There comes a moment in your life when you stop asking, how do I make them like me, and start asking, how do I return to myself? That's the shift. That's the lesson. Because for too long, we've been conditioned to believe that goodness equals availability, that kindness requires constant emotional labor, that love means self-sacrifice, and in the process, we abandon ourselves in small, invisible ways just to be seen, to be chosen, to be understood. But the truth is, you don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to be available to everyone. And you don't need to explain yourself to people who were never listening to begin with. The deeper lesson here is sovereignty, emotional sovereignty, the ability to remain rooted in who you are, even when others push, question, provoke, or walk away. It's the realization that not every invitation deserves a response. Not every emotion needs to be externalized. Not every conflict requires your participation. This isn't about being cold, it's about being clear. Clear on your boundaries, clear on your values, clear on your worth. Silence is not weakness, mystery is not manipulation, and letting go is not failure. They are all expressions of inner strength. And when you start practicing this, when you start honoring your own peace more than someone else's comfort, your life begins to change. You stop reacting to every comment. You stop chasing every apology. You stop leaking your energy into spaces that never appreciated it. Instead, you begin to move with intention. You start to build a life that reflects who you truly are, not who you had to become in order to survive. So here's the takeaway. You don't have to explain your growth. You don't have to justify your distance. You don't have to apologize for choosing yourself. Because the most powerful version of you is the one that no longer needs to be reachable to be real. You just need to be true to you. And that's more than enough.